I had a really interesting email yesterday, and I've hardly had time to look at it. I looked at it once, and I don't know if I can get access to it here, but it was from Will Hutton, and it was on behalf of a stakeholder liaison group with EDF, asking me to give them feedback on how we could make protest experience more pleasant all round. Asking for feedback.
Shut down.
So they were asking me for feedback and to become engaged in a process moving forward to facilitate both their aims and our aims in a useful and constructive way. Now we'll have a look at it later. I'm far from mind probably to get engaged just for the fun of it, but you know what I'd be tempted to say, okay, first of all, don't spy on activists as they did on Greenpeace activists in France when they hacked into their accounts. I think they did it to us too, because while we were in occupation at Hinkley Point, I went back to my email account online and all the settings were in French, which I haven't changed them, so I don't know if they hacked in there. But I didn't have the time to follow it up. And I'd say don't use a nut, you know, a hammer to crack a nut. When we went in to occupy a farmhouse on the site of this proposed nuclear power station, every day we were harassed. Every time they saw a child on the site, they would call out the police. They brought out a truancy officer when a mother brought her child and stayed overnight. They then told all their security staff to stop talking to us because we were getting on so well. And we couldn't figure out what was going on, and then suddenly they appeared with hundreds of papers, and they were taking us to the High Court. And they weren't only trying to evict us, they were trying to get an injunction against all future protests at the site, covering every anti-nuclear organisation in Britain. And they could have just taken us to Taunton Court and got us evicted in the normal way. It would have taken them 3 days. And then, of course, they did the same thing with No Dash for Gas, with an even bigger attempt to hammer the activists. So, in a way I'd like to say to them that, but in another way I don't want to, because the truth is when they do those things, they actually expose themselves and become weaker, and the reason we're here now is because of what happened. And I was really chuffed, not in a personal way, and I took it on later what it meant, but when I saw what was happening online and in the media and everything about what had happened, I was just like, yay, because suddenly that issue was, EDF was out in the open, and it was everyone's pet hate. And that happens with corporations, they become the one to hate at any given time. We can't focus on all of them, so we like to personalise it. And so generally I felt that happening. But in the end, I don't think they're particularly bad. I've just thought a lot about this, and I think that corporations, their behaviour is determined by what business they're in. And fundamentally, all corporations are determined by one thing, which is to increase their profits. There isn't any other reason. And so all their behaviour is that. So when they come up against the common interest, and when they're at odds with the common interest, as they are, in my opinion, with nuclear power, both on price and on safety, and on the absolute scandal which people kind of gloss over in their minds, which is that in order to get 60 years of electricity generation at Hinkley C, we are going to leave a legacy of waste in Somerset, which people, real people, are going to have to organise to contain and monitor for 2,000, 3,000 years. The waste that's left behind, so no benefit to them. And if they don't do it, then potentially they'll get sick and die. So that's what that industry produces as its long-term product. So they are at odds with the common interest, in my opinion, and because of that, it becomes very stark. And in the end, there isn't any common ground. There isn't room to negotiate. We're talking about a company that is locked into making money out of burning fossil fuels and burning uranium. And neither of those now can be in the common interest. So, on the other hand, we're also talking about a company which has obviously vast resources. When you get up against that legal machine, you suddenly realise you're just up against this just implacable, grinding thing that you're way out of your depth with.
I remember, Theo, when I was up at Hinkley, when you were occupying the farm, and the guy delivered these boxes of legal documents, about 20 boxes of legal documents. You know, it's just incredible.
Incredible. So you're up against all that. The games they played to get us into the High Court, they basically told a few lies so they could take us to the High Court by pretending that we were threatening violence. which they got a security guard to perjure himself. Interestingly enough, he was an old security guard who'd become our friend and was like, I'm one of you lads, I'm just a security guard. And then we found out he was their man because he made a false statement about us planning violence. And that got us into the High Court. So they're very devious. Anything they do is only in terms of furthering their goal. But they've also been very good in West Somerset at this massive propaganda and PR thing, which means they've saturated the press, they've saturated the TV, the government and all the local government is completely in their pocket and has gone along with it. The law has been changed so that you can't have a proper planning, you can't scrutinise the plans properly. The whole thing's been fixed in advance. They were given permission to start the work before they had permission to build the power station, which is why we were there, because they destroyed some beautiful part of Somerset's heritage before they have permission, and the project may still not go through, in which case they'll have just destroyed something beautiful and very precious, and it will be left as a sort of green desert. And so they have all that on their side, and they have people working full time. I realised when I was there, it's like, oh hang on, they've got people who get up in the morning, it is their job to think about how they win. They get paid to do it. I get home from work and I have to spend 3 hours on the internet trying to find something, you know, to try and get a press statement out in time and hope that the press will take it up and all that stuff. So we seem to be at a disadvantage. But these huge corporations are very top heavy, and when we poke them in the right places, they start to topple and it all starts to unravel. And that is happening now for the nuclear project. They have now nowhere to put their waste, and that's becoming very serious for the people in Somerset, because people in Somerset who even thought, well, actually probably in terms of jobs it's a good thing, are now realising that Somerset is probably set to become a nuclear waste dump forever in effect, because there's nowhere now to put the waste since Cumbria refused to dig a big hole to put it in. So they have nowhere to put the waste. They still can't fix the price because they want, EDF want 10% rate of profit on the electricity they make at Hinkley C. And because of the way nuclear is, the only way they can do that is by getting the government to underwrite the price and pass it on to the consumer. So they're trying to get the basic cost of energy, of electricity, doubled for the next 35 years, guaranteed, and every consumer to be levied who uses electricity to pay for that power station, which is in effect, could be effectively doubling costs when we think that offshore wind, for instance, is going to be at a lower price by 2020 than nuclear. They are in a position where they want the government to underwrite all the construction costs, so that if anything goes wrong, they won't be liable for the billions of that. They want the insurance. The insurance is covered by the government if we have a Fukushima-style disaster, which is possible at Hinkley Point, just as it was at Fukushima. If we have one of those, then our country would be paying for the cleanup, not EDF. And when the waste is left in 2100, it's very unlikely there will even be a corporation called EDF or a government department called the ONR or any of the stuff that they've set up. There's just going to be a load of waste and a load of people trying to figure out what to do with it. And again, generations will have to pay for that. So it's incredibly subsidised profit. It's an absolute scandal. It's a complete rip-off. But it's been difficult with nuclear because of this issue of decarbonisation. And it was interesting Danny mentioned that, because while there is an alliance of corporate and business people and all the rest of it, Al Gore got through to them and they've gone, yeah, we take this seriously. Miliband set up this thing, Carbon Connect, whatever it's called. And it's all very good and they want targets, they want to decarbonise. A key part of that has been nuclear power. So the government is now in a situation where they don't have another plan. Nuclear is meant to take the base load, and yet nuclear is looking unlikely to even be built in time. And they can't, even this Tory government can't come up with a deal with EDF. They still haven't reached the deal after a month, because EDF want 90 and they want to pay 80, and it's a bottom line thing, and they know how unpopular it's going to be if they turn around and say we're going to push the prices up to subsidise nuclear. So nuclear is in a very, very shaky situation. But the Green Movement became quite unclear about it, and climate change became this hammer with which to hit us in the anti-nuclear movement. I don't want to be anti-nuclear. My main activity has been on climate change previously. But being in Somerset and being someone who had a history with nuclear, I had to take it on because I couldn't believe it was coming back, actually. But I found then, I got a letter from George Monbiot, saying, hey Theo, I like you and good luck, but you're doing the wrong thing. Because if we don't have nuclear, everyone's going to burn coal and it's a disaster. And there are still, I think, people who believe that if we don't go along the nuclear route, we are screwed. And we're going to burn fossil fuels, and that puts us in a difficult position. But it's only difficult because we don't trust in our own power, because we don't believe that we can actually build a strong enough movement to argue for the only rational course, which is a renewables revolution and is a massive energy efficiency drive. You know, if we on DEC's own figures, if we insulated every building in Britain, we would cut energy consumption by 1/3 in this country. And that would cut fuel poverty. That would mean that old people don't die next winter. Whereas nuclear power doesn't offer those benefits, it just passes that price on to some future generation. So, in that situation, I'm so glad that No Dash for Gas got clobbered by EDF and then saw them off. Because suddenly everything, the ante was upped, and suddenly EDF was fighting on several fronts. So much so that they're now writing us emails saying, what can we do to be nicer? You know, they are on their back foot. And our strategy right now, Stop Hinkley, is to drive home the waste issue. There may be legal challenges, I can't go into that, there may be. Drive home the waste issue and drive home and create as much noise around this strike price, which is going to be brought out in the next few weeks if they manage to come up with a deal. I went to my local garage the other day, and the garage guy there, who'd seen me on telly, evidently on the local telly, in debate with people about it, he said, he doesn't usually talk, and he certainly never swears in front of customers, but he said, it's all gone a bit quiet at Hinkley, hasn't it? And I said, it has, yeah, they're trying to get the strike price. And he said, those fuckers, they want to double the fucking price, and they want the government to fucking pay it. He said, if the government go with this, they are fucking out, and I am not having it. And it's like, he was just like, because to him that was just, he saw what that was. But you know what it is, you just have to keep driving and driving and driving to get that level of public awareness. And to do that, we have to build alliances. So one thing I want to say is, the hard bit about building alliances is where there are people, where there's an overlap, and where there are people who say, yeah, I'm with the No Dash for Gas, I'm not sure about the nuclear bit, you know, because maybe we need it and stuff like that. Now, I've had emails from people telling us in the No Hinkley campaign that there are certain things we should drop. They say, well, if you drop that, it'll be better. They mean I don't like it. My attitude to that is, no, you pick it up. You understand why both of these things are unacceptable. And don't say, well, it would be easier to say, all right, we'll just cut the carbon, but we'll stick with nuclear. But be really clear that we're standing for something principled here, because we're standing for a rational society. So we're trying to build a movement. This is our opportunity to really start to build a movement. Because if we have a victory, for instance, if EDF and the government, if it falls through at Hinkley Point, then that will be the collapse of the British nuclear programme. And then it gets down to a very straight issue. Is it going to be fossil fuel, or is it going to be renewable? And it will become a straight battle, and renewables has to win by all rational arguments and by the will of the people if they get a chance to express it. So I think it's necessary to join up to clarify the issue. Nuclear takes money, takes energy away from renewables, and affects the future of renewables in this country, because the government say we've got it sorted with nuclear, and they don't have to think about it. They don't want to have to think about it. They're just thinking about the next election. And the key point is that EDF now don't have another investor. Their investor, Centrica, British Gas, pulled out of the project at Hinkley C, which means that currently they need a new investor. They won't get an investor if there's noise and bad feeling and bad taste around EDF, which is why we're up in the ante now. And all I can think about, we'll talk about this, is that we find ways that we can support No Dash for Gas, and that No Dash for Gas can support us. We attack EDF on two fronts, and on the basis of that victory we build a movement and move on.